I was sipping my morning coffee, the steam curling against my face like a quiet reminder that life, at least the one I'd built for myself, was calm now. The city skyline stretched beyond my apartment window, glass towers catching the sun, and for a moment, I almost believed the past had stopped chasing me. Almost. My phone buzzed against the marble counter, screen lighting up with a notification. At first, I ignored it. I'd trained myself not to jump at every ping, not to live in constant anticipation of bad news. But then I saw the preview. Inspiring family raises $168,000 for disabled daughter. And the photo was me. Not me. Exactly. Someone had taken my teenage face, softened it, manipulated it, and plastered it onto a girl in a wheelchair I didn't even know. My breath caught in my throat. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. But no. The freckles across her cheeks were mine. The shape of her jawline mine. They hadn't just stolen an image. They'd stolen me. I pressed my palm against my silk blouse, steadying the thud in my chest. The article's headline blurred as tears stung my eyes, though anger quickly burned them away. My family. It had to be them. Years of silence shattered in an instant, replaced by a flood of betrayal. And as the city glittered outside my window, I realized the past wasn't done with me yet. I was 19 when I finally understood what betrayal truly felt like. Up until then, I thought my family's cruelty was just ordinary dysfunction, the kind you complain about in dorm rooms or late-night phone calls with friends. But the night I found out what they'd done, my whole world tilted on its axis. I'd come home from community college for a weekend, still carrying the hopeful energy of someone who believed in second chances. My backpack was heavy with textbooks, my heart a little lighter with the thought that maybe, just maybe, things were getting better between us. But then I overheard them in the kitchen. My mother's voice was giddy, almost proud. "People are eating it up. Can you believe it? We already passed 50,000. My father chuckled. "Told you it would work. Poor little disabled girl. Who could resist?" And then my sister laughed. The best part is we didn't even have to hire anyone. We had the perfect face already. My stomach dropped. The chair scraped against the tile as I stumbled into view. "What face?" I asked, my voice trembling. They froze. But the look in my mother's eyes told me everything. A laptop sat open on the counter, and when I looked, I saw her, me, a wheelchair, a fabricated diagnosis, a GoFundMe page filled with sympathetic strangers donating their hard-earned money to a girl who didn't exist. "You used my face," I whispered. "You don't understand." My mother snapped, her tone shifting from guilt to irritation in a heartbeat. "It's not hurting anyone. It's helping us. You should be grateful. Grateful. For being erased. For being replaced by a fake version of myself more useful to them." My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the glass I was holding. My throat closed up and I could barely breathe. "You made me into someone who doesn't even exist. Do you realize how sick that is?" "You're being dramatic," my father said. "Always so delusional." That word, delusional, stuck in my chest like a shard of glass. I left that night, wearing nothing but a thin sweater despite the November chill. My grandmother's locket, the one she'd pressed into my palm before she passed, rested against my skin, warm from my tears. She used to say, "Don't let them decide who you are, Emily. You write your own story." So I did. I walked away from the only home I'd ever known, carrying nothing but that locket and the raw, burning determination to never let them define me again. I didn't have a plan when I left. Just a backpack, a locket, and the stubborn certainty that I wasn't going to be someone else's puppet anymore. The first few months were brutal. I worked odd jobs, bartending, tutoring, even temp work at offices where no one bothered to learn my name. My fingers ached from endless hours of typing resumes, emails, and, eventually, my own freelance projects. But each small victory felt monumental. It was at a local networking event that I met Claire, a seasoned graphic designer who ran her own studio. She had the kind of presence that made you feel simultaneously invisible and capable all at once. When I nervously showed her some of my designs, she didn't scoff or pretend to be impressed. She leaned back, fingers steepled, and said, "Emily, you've got something most people only dream of. Don't waste it waiting for someone to notice. Let me help you build it." Her mentorship became my lifeline. Nights stretched into mornings as I taught myself new software, experimented with styles, and learned how to pitch myself without trembling. I cried more times than I can count, sometimes from exhaustion, sometimes from self-doubt, but each tear was a little fuel for the fire that refused to die. I kept my success hidden from my family. They had claimed me as their victim. I would not give them the satisfaction of knowing how far I'd come. I avoided social media, posted only innocuous updates, and cultivated a life that was mine and mine alone. The first big breakthrough was a project for a boutique publishing house. They loved my concept, approved it, and the payment deposited into my account felt surreal, a tangible reminder that I was finally building something real. The second, a marketing firm, offered me a contract that doubled my income. By the end of my first year, I was self-sufficient, living in a small, sunlit apartment with a window overlooking the city I was starting to feel belonged to me. The funny thing is, I often thought about them. The family who'd tried to erase me, who had profited from my image without consent, and I realized their success was fleeting and hollow. Meanwhile, mine was built brick by brick, late nights, and relentless persistence. I smiled when I remembered their fake GoFundMe page. The irony was delicious. While they were celebrating with strangers, I was thriving on my own terms, fully in control of my narrative. And yet, I carried the locket everywhere, a quiet reminder of why I was here. Claire often joked that I was overly sentimental, but I knew that small piece of silver was a compass, pointing me back to the only truth I'd ever trusted, my own voice. Every client, every project, every late-night victory reinforced a single fact. I was no longer the scared girl who left her family's home. I was Emily Carter, independent, unapologetic, and quietly unstoppable. It started with a knock at my office door. I'd been reviewing a client proposal, my fingers stained with ink from making notes, when the receptionist peeked in. "Your parents are here," she said, her voice hesitant. I froze. Emily Carter, composed and confident, suddenly felt a ripple of old tension. My heart thudded, not with fear, but with anticipation. They had no idea what they were walking into. The moment they stepped through the glass doors, I took them in silently. My mother's eyes flicked over the room, a mixture of familiarity and confusion. My father's jaw tightened as he noticed the framed certifications on the wall. My sister, holding herself a little too straight, was blinking rapidly, as if expecting someone else to emerge from the shadows. I gestured toward the office, letting them absorb every detail. The polished oak desk, the subtle art pieces I'd collected on trips for inspiration, the sunlight spilling onto the floor like a spotlight on my accomplishments, it all spoke louder than any words. "Sit," I said, my voice calm, but carrying the weight of years they had tried to steal from me. They obeyed, hesitating, scanning the room as if trying to find the Emily they remembered, the scared, obedient girl who would have cried and apologized for daring to exist. Instead, they found someone else entirely. I leaned back in my chair, fingers interlaced, eyes locked on my mother first. "Do you know who this is?" I asked. My mother opened her mouth, but no words came. "This," I continued, holding up a portfolio, "is my work. The company you see behind me, the clients I manage, the contracts, the revenue, it all belongs to me. Every dollar, every project, every recognition I've earned. Not one of them came from lies or stolen images. Everything you used me for, you tried to turn me into a story, a face, a victim, and you called me delusional when I protested." I watched as color drained from their faces. My father's lips pressed into a thin line. My sister's hands clenched nervously in her lap. "You took my image," I said, voice softening but growing firmer with each word, "and turned it into a charity stunt. You raised $168,000 using my likeness, and when I tried to speak, you told me I was imagining it. But I was never imagining anything. I've documented everything, saved every message, screenshot, and email. You exploited me, and now you're here, facing the truth." They looked at one another, guilt washing over them in slow, unsteady waves. My mother's eyes glistened, though I could see she was more shocked than repentant. My father's posture shifted, unsure whether to defend himself or crumble. My sister avoided my gaze entirely, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. I paused, letting the silence fill the room. The weight of years, of stolen identity, of betrayal, hung heavily. But I wasn't trembling anymore. I wasn't the frightened girl who fled my home. I closed the portfolio and set it on the desk. I'm not the delusional one here. I am real, I am thriving, and I am completely independent of you. Today, you are seeing me as I always was meant to be, someone you tried to erase, someone you underestimated. And now, the choice to acknowledge that truth is yours. They didn't speak. They couldn't. For the first time in years, they were confronted with the full impact of their actions, and I, finally, held the power. The room was quiet, but I could feel the tension vibrating in the air like an electric current. For years, they had controlled the narrative. They had dictated who I was, who I could be, even how strangers perceived me. Now, the power had shifted entirely, and it was my turn to set the rules. I'm willing to help, I said, my tone measured, deliberate. But not without conditions. Not without change. Not without accountability. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. You will not profit from me again, in any way, shape, or form. The money you raised under my image? Consider it returned through transparency or charitable donation. And you will stop pretending I don't exist. My mother's hands shook as she tried to speak, but I raised a finger. Listen first. Each family member had their own condition. My sister, who had been complicit in the scam, needed to take responsibility for her choices. Therapy, honest reflection, and finding her own path in life, no shortcuts, no exploiting anyone else. My father, the orchestrator of the manipulation, needed to acknowledge the damage done, apologize publicly to me, and commit to genuine personal growth. My mother, the one who smiled at my suffering while pocketing the benefits, needed to let go of control and learn empathy without manipulation. I watched them process it, saw the subtle shifts, the tight shoulders loosening, the hesitation in their eyes. Some of it was fear, yes, but some of it was recognition, too. Recognition that their old tactics no longer worked. That I was no longer a child to frighten or a face to profit from. I care about you, I continued, letting warmth thread through my words, but I will not enable old patterns. You have to meet me halfway. I will give you guidance, but the steps forward are yours to take. I could see the weight of realization settle on their faces. My father's usual defiance softened, just slightly, as though he were testing the possibility that he could change. My mother's eyes glimmered with unshed tears, the first sign of real accountability. And my sister, still avoiding my gaze, finally nodded, small but sincere, as if finally seeing the consequences of her choices. I took a deep breath and felt a calmness I hadn't known in years. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was creating boundaries, and in doing so, I was reclaiming the family I wanted to be a part of, not the one I had been forced to endure. The rules are simple, I said, standing. Accountability, honesty, and effort. I will help you, but only if you commit to building real lives for yourselves, separate from the lies you've spun. Fail at this, and the door closes. Permanently. Their faces were a mixture of relief and trepidation, and I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile. I wasn't punishing them. I was offering them a chance to grow while protecting myself. Finally, the balance had shifted. I had control, not just over my life, but over the story that had once been stolen from me. I walked toward the window, the city lights stretching below, a reflection of my own journey. Bright, steady, and entirely mine. For the first time, I realized I could extend compassion without compromise. Power without cruelty. Strength without bitterness. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore, 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 underscore. Word count, 590. Do you want me to proceed with Section 6, Resolution and Emotional Closure, 400 to 500 words? You said. Next. ChatGPT said. Here's Section 6, Resolution and Emotional Closure, for 60 words. Underscore, 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 underscore. Weeks passed, and I began to notice subtle changes. My sister started attending therapy and even reached out to apologize, not just to me, but to others she had influenced. My mother, surprisingly, volunteered at a local nonprofit, her actions a quiet attempt to learn empathy without self-interest. My father, slow and awkward, began working with a counselor to confront his past behaviors. None of it was perfect, none of it happened overnight, but I could see the beginnings of real transformation. I watched them from a distance at first, cautious but hopeful. There were moments that still stung, reminders of the years they'd tried to erase me, but I felt no desire to punish them. That part of my life belonged to the past. I was living my truth now, and I had earned the right to decide who could be part of it. The locket, worn and warm against my chest, remained my talisman. I touched it one morning as I prepared for a meeting, and memories of my grandmother's voice floated back. Don't let them decide who you are, Emily. You write your own story. I smiled. I had written it, every chapter, every struggle, every triumph. And it had turned out far better than I could have imagined. I thought about the fake charity campaign, the money raised from my stolen image, and I realized that even in the face of betrayal, I had grown stronger. I had taken what was stolen and built something real. Something lasting. Sitting at my desk, overlooking the skyline that once felt so distant, I felt a deep, serene satisfaction. The people I cared about were slowly learning to grow, and I was no longer tethered to their manipulations. I had transformed pain into purpose, betrayal into empowerment. I leaned back, letting the late afternoon light warm my face, and whispered to myself, almost like a vow, I am no one's shadow. I am my own light. And in that moment, I truly believed it.